Hunter Greene was already one of my favorite breakout picks this season, and now there's a report that he added a splitter and a curveball, the exact thing anybody worried about the depth of his repertoire would want. And there were already two pretty clear angles to take in liking Hunter Greene for 2024. The first was a pretty basic combination of looking at results combined with his underlying statistics. He posted a 4.82 ERA, but his fielder independent pitching, or FIP, suggested he was probably more like 60 points below that mark. FIP is a metric that is scaled to ERA, but cares pretty much only about strikeouts, walks, and home runs allowed, and is actually more predictive of ERA in subsequent seasons than just using prior year ERA. There were even other predictive ERA models that thought he was more like a full run better than that 4.82 he posted. You could even look at something as basic as K-walk ratio and see that among pitchers with 100 innings, he sat 14th, right next to Garrett Cole, Zach Wheeler, Shohei Ohtani, and Michael King. He just had a huge home run problem, partially because he plays in Great American Ballpark, which actually has the #1 park factor in baseball for home run inflation on a 3-year rolling basis. In terms of home runs allowed per 9 innings, Greene was in the 22nd percentile, meaning 78% of pitchers allowed less home runs per 9 innings than him last season. That's not that great. The other angle is easy to buy into on Greene, it's just that his stuff is absolutely filthy. Stuff Plus is a metric created by Enosaurus that estimates how a given pitch will perform based on prior pitches with similar characteristics. It focuses on things like movement, velocity, release, and some other small variables. And Hunter Greene last season was number 5 in all of baseball, thanks to a top 5 fastball grade and a top 15 slider grade. He throws everything so hard that Stuff Plus really likes him because velocity is one of the biggest indicators of success in any given pitch. So it's not too much of a hot take to say that Greene is going to be a top 20 or 30 pitcher next year on these two angles alone, underlying metrics and how good the raw stuff is. He's projected to be a top 35 pitcher right now by Fangraphs Steamer. ATC projection system, which is also on Fangraphs, has him more around the 45th best pitcher. And the bat created by Derek Carty thinks he's more like a top 60 to 70 guy. So there's your range of outcomes for him. If you believe in Greene, then you align with Steamer more than the bat. And now we find out that Hunter Greene is working on a splitter and a curveball. His prior mix was 4-seam slider primarily, and he mixed in some changeups. He's essentially taking that changeup and replacing it with a splitter, which off the bat is going to give him more vertical separation between his 4-seam fastball and that off-speed pitch. That vertical separation being around 10 inches or so is a pretty surefire way to get at least kind of like an average splitter in any model. My guess is that the splitter will be 90 to 91 miles per hour with around 4 to 5 inches of induced vertical break, with 10 to 12 inches of arm side movement, and we'll say it's around maybe 1,200 rotations per minute. His changeup actually had pretty similar specs. It was just up to about 9 to 10 inches of vertical break with more spin. A splitter just allows you to kill more spin, create less resistance to the force of gravity, and achieve that drop separation that we're looking at a pretty similar velocity. He's essentially going to cut about 4 to 5 inches of vertical break from that present changeup and maintain much of everything else. It will sit around here on a pitch plot compared to the current changeup, which really isn't separating much from the 4-seam. And my guess is that Stuff Plus models will see this as about an average pitch, anywhere from say a 95 to a 105 Stuff score. I'll play Switzerland, I'll put it in the middle and say it's going to be 100. Now I've dubbed 2024 the year of the splitter, and I'm feeling pretty good about that so far. But I have to admit, in the case of Greene, I think I'm actually slightly more excited about the curveball than I am the splitter. I say that because curveballs tend to grade out well when they're thrown hard, and my guess here is that Greene should have a pretty easy time throwing his hard, given he pumps 98 with 90 mile per hour plus sliders. I'm looking for something that's like 82 to 84 miles per hour on this curveball, and I think that's pretty achievable. For curveballs that are just more get me over strike stealers, the velocity doesn't matter a ton. But if you want to diversify usage of a curveball like this, use it as a swing miss pitch, late in counts, etc., I generally think they need to be hard, even if that means sacrificing some total movement. There's a prospect right now in the minors by the name of River Ryan for the Dodgers, who I actually think has one of the few plus curveballs from a movement spec standpoint alone, because he's throwing at 82 plus, and he's still getting about 18 inches of total movement, 10 inches vertically, and 8 inches horizontally. If Greene can mimic that pitch to some extent, get something like negative 10 inches of vertical break with 10 inches of sweep, and he's up to that 82 to 84 mile per hour window we're talking about, I think this pitch is going to grade out not only as above average, but plus. I'll peg it somewhere around a 110 stuff plus based on my predicted movement here. Obviously, we don't know his in-game shape on these pitches right now, so I'm speculating, but speculation is fun. And see, I'm not just the splitter guy. I also like hard curveballs, so much in this case that I'm actually projecting a better stuff score for Greene's curve compared to his split. When a pitcher adds a new pitch, I think it just widens the range of projections on a given pitcher. A projection is an average of a range of outcomes. It's not going to look at something like Hunter Greene and go, okay, we think there's a 10% chance that the pitches he add will be positive run value pitches, and therefore, this 70th percentile projection, we're going to move forward a bit. And that naivety in most public projections, I think, is totally fine. You want to understand on a really baseline level what's going into them, so you can then make subtle kind of I know better adjustments off those projections based on new information we get, like Hunter Greene adding a splitter and a curveball. It's just my point in this is that I understand it's fair to be hesitant and waiting for these pitches and seeing how they're used, etc. But if you're doing that from a valuation standpoint, it's probably going to be too late. So you kind of have to take a risk here on a guy like Hunter Greene. And I think that risk, especially on a guy like Hunter Greene, is a pretty fair one to take. He has a pretty small repertoire. It's always been the knock. He has really good stuff, and he's 24. So when a guy like this adds something new, I'm going to care about it a bit more than if, say, a deeper mix kind of control-based guy like a Merrill Kelly or something makes a tweak. This felt inevitable to some extent for Greene based on the depth of his repertoire and the results he had. So much so that Enosaurus even put out his breakout pictures this season, put Hunter Greene as the header picture, and then in the Hunter Greene blurb said he's looking for him to add a curveball. It almost makes you wonder if Eno knew something before it happened. I would bet that Greene throws both his splitter and curveball more than 10% of the time each in 2024, and that he pulls that usage from his four-seam fastball. And if he does that, I'm happy to bet on his results leaning more towards that steamer projection than the bats projection. But we're not done yet. Let's dig into why Hunter Greene's fastball has played down despite an amazing stuff score, and why I think that splitter and curveball will help him so much. The fastball, I think, is played down due to a combination of reasons. I think it has to do with the shape of the pitch, potentially the usage, and also the locations. His fastball could be performing poorly because the shape of the pitch might matter more than the velocity in his specific case for whatever reason. A stuff model's probably going to disagree with this point, but given that other four-seam fastballs thrown from his release height average out to having about 16 inches of vertical break, and he's just underneath that at 15.7, I think you can make an argument that the shape is average even if the velo is pretty far above average. Grayson Rodriguez, for example, has almost the exact same shape on his four-seam fastball. He throws it slightly softer from a spot that's about 3 to 4 inches lower, and it doesn't really have the same contact quality issues. Perhaps that illustrates how much release matters in shape. Some people call Greene's fastball straight, which I disagree with unless I'm understanding what a straight fastball is. As I said, I think the movement is kind of just average, and maybe that hurts him in particular more than a stuff model thinks it should be hurting him. So maybe that shape element matters, but I'm not totally convinced that that alone is killing all the effectiveness of the velocity. It could be a count leverage thing. Most pitchers are terrible when they're behind in the count. Greene is no exception. He's like really bad when he's behind versus either-handedness of hitter. His fastball had a 793 slugging percentage against right-handed hitters when he was behind in the count last season, and his location is kind of just over the middle of a plate, and all the damage he allows is in the direction of his most natural miss, which is to his arm side. I definitely get the philosophy of letting his stuff eat middle because it's filthy, and I generally advocate for that on this channel, but it clearly wasn't working for Greene. And it's kind of a similar story versus left-handed hitters behind in the count, but at least here from a location standpoint, the misses he's giving up damage on are pull misses to his glove side into left-handed hitters, so that's a bit less common based on his natural miss, which is going to be again to his arm side. I like the idea of adding the splitter and curveball in behind in the count specifically, even if it's only like 5 to 10% of the time, as well as when he's ahead for a berry pitch, because I just think adding something in to keep people off his fastball when he's behind the count will help a lot from a contact quality standpoint. And to further illustrate this point about count leverage, take a look at Spencer Strider's forcing fastball when he's behind and Hunter Greene's forcing fastball when he's behind. Both are getting absolutely pummeled from an xwOBA or xSlug standpoint. Greene's with a resulting slug about 100 points worse. That's likely due to his home park. We think Strider's fastball is the best, and rightfully so, because it is, but we also think that Greene's is really bad because of the results, when in reality, they're not incredibly different pitches behind in the count. Strider's missing more bats, sure, but count leverage is real and often turns really good pitchers into 2004 Jamie Moyer. And let's touch on locations one last time. If you look at Greene's fastball locations to left-handed hitters, I like how he diversifies it a bit. When he's even in count, he plays with it inside sometimes and outside. When he's ahead, he's going for whiffs. And when he's behind, he's just trying to grab the outer third of the plate for a strike and get back into the count. To righties, though, he's not as sharp to me. When he's ahead, sure, he elevates really well, but when he's even, and especially when he's behind, as I mentioned, he leaks into that heart of the zone a ton. So it's not a surprise to me that his four-seam performance, despite having a shape that I wouldn't necessarily peg to be good versus lefties, performs slightly better versus lefties than righties. So those are three reasonable ideas, I think, as to why the four-seam fastballs play down so much for Hunter Greene, nestled into the broader picture of how the splitter and curveball will really help him in a variety of counts. I want to see some usage of it behind. I know he's probably going to use it when he's even in ahead, but pulling down from the four-seam usage, getting away from that pitch that's allowing a ton of slug is going to help, and then adding in these other two pitches I really think is going to make people lay off the fastball as much, make him more of a diverse pitcher. But the question is, what do you think? Are you in on Hunter Greene? Are you hesitant? Do you want to wait and see what's going to happen? Even if that means you're going to be late to the party on a guy like this. He's one of my big breakout picks for this coming season. He's only 24. I really think widening the repertoire here is a really smart thing for Derek Johnson and the rest of the Reds group to do with Hunter Greene. I'm really excited for 2024. Let me know what you think. I'll be in the comments. I'm curious on thoughts as always and every single time. Thank you for watching.